Hello, and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Here's a look at some of the stories we have coming up for you today. AT&T and Verizon agreed to delay a scheduled 5G rollout for the third time. That comes after safety and security concerns from the airlines. Senators are back on Capitol Hill this week, and Democrats are doubling down on efforts to sidestep the filibuster in order to pass their voting rights bill. There's a few paths Schumer could take, but which one is he choosing? And will they have a chance to change the Senate's rules to pass a national voting rights law? The pandemic has had minimal impact on some states throughout the country, yet they have been subject to one-size-fits-all mandates. One of those states is Alaska, which is still reporting under 1,000 total deaths since the start of the pandemic. We have Alaska candidate for United States Senate, Tshibaka, here to discuss. AT&T and Verizon today announced that they would postpone deployment of 5G near some airports. The announcement comes after major U.S. airlines issued a public warning. About 90% of wireless tower deployment is going forward as scheduled, according to a White House statement. The postponement follows warnings from CEOs of major U.S. airlines, who say the new C-band 5G service, set to begin on Wednesday, could render a significant number of wide-body aircraft unusable. The chief executives of American Airlines, Delta, United, and Southwest wrote in a letter, "Unless our major hubs are cleared to fly, the vast majority of the traveling and shipping public will essentially be grounded." The FAA has warned that potential interference could affect sensitive airplane instruments and significantly hamper low-visibility operations. Airlines late on Monday were considering canceling some international flights scheduled to arrive in the United States on Wednesday. AT&T and Verizon have previously delayed deployment twice already. They argue C-band 5G has been successfully deployed in about 40 other countries without aviation interference problems arising. Today, the Supreme Court rejected a request to block a federal mask mandate for air travel. President Biden's executive order requires all passengers on airplanes and other public transportation to wear masks. A father filed an emergency application challenging the mandate on behalf of his autistic son. The father and son were turned away from air flights. The father says his 4-year-old son suffers from a rare form of autism and is unable to wear a mask for extended periods of time. As of now, 20% of the U.S. population has had the CCP virus infection at some point in time. Data from Johns Hopkins University shows that 66 million Americans have had the virus since the pandemic began. 4 million, or about 1%, have been hospitalized. The number of asymptomatic cases is unknown. That means the percentage of infected Americans is likely higher. 63% of the U.S. population is fully vaccinated, but the vaccination rate varies by region. Meanwhile, almost all states say that 99.9% of those 65 and over have received at least one dose. The Biden administration has quietly launched its website, covidtest.gov, today. U.S. residents could sign up for free and receive 4 free COVID tests, and orders will start to ship in late January. Some states have been significantly less impacted by the global pandemic that originated from communist China. One of those states is Alaska. With universal vaccine mandates and one-size-fits-all policies being handed down, we thought we should get some perspective from one of those states. Earlier, we spoke with candidate for United States Senate, Tshibaka. Tshibaka, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
I'm glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, Kelly, Alaska is such a unique state in so many ways. When it comes to the pandemic, less than 1,000 people have died in your state. Granted, there's a lot, lower of a population. But how have Alaskans been dealing with and coping with the pandemic?
Fortunately for us, we haven't had the same kind of health crisis as other people across the United States, but we have experienced the same national crisis as other people because Joe Biden has issued this unconstitutional shot mandate. People should only have to get the COVID shot if they want to. But because he's had this unconstitutional mandate, people have lost their jobs, and we're having the same healthcare crisis as other people, with people losing their jobs in the healthcare system, and we're having a healthcare worker shortage. It's been a national crisis that we're experiencing. He's just bulldozed through our civil rights, our medical autonomy, and our rights to our jobs as he's issued this unconstitutional mandate to millions of Americans. And it's caused an economic crisis and a healthcare crisis for us up here in Alaska.
Now, Kelly, the universal mandate for the larger size companies was shut down by the Supreme Court last week, but it sounds like what you're saying is there's been a culture created of mandates where companies are taking this into their own hands. What are your thoughts, I guess, on the Supreme Court's ruling, and how is this still affecting the people of Alaska?
I'm really thankful for the Supreme Court's ruling. We've known from the beginning that the mandate was unconstitutional. It's disturbing that the leader of the free world knowingly implements an unconstitutional mandate. Remember, Joe Biden said previously he knew he didn't have the authority to do this, but he did it anyway. Our leaders are supposed to govern at the consent of the governed and to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution, but he didn't do that. And so we had to wait months for the Supreme Court to intervene. The other thing that concerns me is that the United States Senate, people like Lisa Murkowski, could have intervened a long time ago, and we would have been protected. Our government leaders are supposed to protect the constitutional rights of the American citizens, but they didn't do it in this case. And so we had Joe Biden acting like a tyrant, taking over the medical autonomy of millions of Americans' bodies and holding them at duress of their jobs and making them take a shot that they may not have wanted. That's not the kind of America we're supposed to live in. And so I'm glad the Supreme Court protected and defended us. But like you said, many businesses are already following Joe Biden's lead. And so many people are having to take a shot that they don't want to take and otherwise not be able to take care of their families or put a roof over their heads.
Now, you just mentioned Senator Lisa Murkowski. You're running in the in the Republican primary against her for United States Senate. What are some of the key issues, other than what we're just talking about with the mandates, that are important to you that you'll be running on?
I am honored to have the Republican Party of Alaska's endorsement in this race, and they've censured Murkowski, said she cannot use the Republican name in her race. And there's many reasons why. One of them is I support the authority of Alaskans having autonomy over things like their land and their constitutional rights, and we support jobs in Alaska. Lisa Murkowski has really supported and enabled the Biden administration, approving liberal nominees into his administration, breaking with Republicans 12 times. And they've championed a radical lockdown of Alaska's economy, access to our lands and resources. Biden has shut down our oil fields, killing thousands of jobs and a hope for our future. This has led to what we are now seeing as a global oil crisis, with Russia sitting at the top and Biden going to OPEC plus, begging for oil. But the fact is, we've got plenty of oil here in Alaska. We were energy independent under the Trump administration. But who enabled all of this crisis? Lisa Murkowski, with a deciding vote for Deb Haaland as the Interior Secretary. She's helped provide deciding votes for many of Biden's agenda, his nominees, and his legislation. And it's for that the Republican Party has censured her. We need to block Biden, not be buddies with Biden, if we're going to have an America First policy coming from the United States Senate.
Candidate for United States Senate, Kelly Tshibaka, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm at kellyforak.com if you want to learn more.
All eyes are on the Senate floor this week as senators move forward with debate on a national voting rights bill. Is there a chance to successfully change Senate rules, setting the stage to bypass the Republican minority to pass these new laws? NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
Senators have returned to Capitol Hill this week, with Democrats doubling down on their efforts to sidestep the filibuster and pass their voting rights bill. Today at noon, Senate Leader Chuck Schumer took the floor to open up debate on the bill, acknowledging that it won't be easy, but it's a step that both he and President Biden see as necessary.
No one denies the path ahead is an uphill struggle. Republicans have been clear they will entertain no bipartisan compromise on voting rights. But long odds are no excuse for this chamber to avoid this important issue.
Schumer says it's important for all senators to go on record, which is why he's still holding the vote, although the prospects look grim. And the White House echoed that same message.
The president's view is that the American people deserve to see where their leaders stand on protecting their fundamental rights. That is a reason to move forward with this debate.
Activists outside on the Capitol steps singing as the debate kicked off. Capitol Police made arrests after warning the protesters that they breached an off-limits area. Senators now preparing to vote to change filibuster rules to get around the 60-vote threshold.
You know, Anderson, in a democracy, there has to be an equilibrium, a balance between majority rule and minority rights. What we have in the Senate right now is an inversion of this basic principle.
But just last week, that 60-vote threshold was used by Democrats to block Senator Ted Cruz's bill to sanction the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, per the White House's request.
Declaring that simple majorities should always get their way. But late last week, they literally wielded the 60-vote threshold themselves.
The president of Liberty Government Affairs says if the filibuster is eroded, the Senate becomes another version of the House, and some states will lose their voices.
It just isn't what our founders intended. Our founders intended for the Senate to be a deliberative body, and it will not be a deliberative body if they get rid of the filibuster.
Melina, is there any indication on how Schumer will move forward here, or any sign that Senators Manchin and Sinema, those key holdout votes, are giving any ground?
Well, as of right now, it's looking like those two senators haven't changed their minds for how they'll vote on the question of the filibuster. Right now, senators are debating to vote on the election bill itself, and that vote is likely to happen either tomorrow or Thursday. After Republicans move to block the election bill itself, that's when Senate Leader Schumer will bring up a proposal to change the rules. As for which technical proposals Schumer will make to change the rules, that's unclear right now. There's a couple of different paths that he could take on this to get the job done. All of them narrow, and none of them will be easy. So we'll follow this closely and have more updates for you as it plays out. Steve?
Thanks for that, Melina. Senator Rand Paul was highly critical in a tweet on Monday directed at the TV provider DIRECTV. The TV service provider recently canceled conservative channel One America News Network, otherwise known as OANN. The Republican senator from Kentucky said in his tweet, "DIRECTV is canceling OANN, so I just canceled my home DIRECTV. Why give money to people who hate us?" Bloomberg disclosed last Friday that DIRECTV will not renew its distribution deal with OANN when it expires at the end of April. DIRECTV is a subsidiary of AT&T. On Monday, OANN began appealing to the public, saying cancel culture in news is unacceptable. DIRECTV is OANN's largest and most important distributor, and some see the cancellation as a form of ideological censorship. America is facing a worker shortage in space. The watchdog for NASA says it is concerned the agency does not have enough astronauts for its future missions. NASA recently released a report on the astronaut corps. It found this fiscal year NASA faces a shortfall in the number of astronauts needed for missions, including trips to the International Space Station. The report warns if the issue isn't fixed, NASA faces crew disruptions and mission delays. Republicans gained a large number of voters in 2021, President Biden's first year in office. How might the upcoming midterms make his term more challenging? And the Golden State Warriors co-owner Chamath Palihapitiya is facing backlash after saying that nobody cares about persecuted Uyghurs in China. North Korea has increased its missile launch activity. How to handle North Korea could be the next big test for the Biden presidency. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. This Thursday marks President Biden's first year in the White House. A new Gallup survey shows that Republicans gained a large number of voters over the last year. What could that mean for the upcoming midterms and for President Biden? The midterm elections are about 10 months away. All seats in the House and at least 34 seats in the Senate will be up for election. One analyst believes the chance of Republicans winning the House is almost a given.
This is likely to be a tidal wave of Republican victories in November. So I think there's probably nothing Biden can do about that.
A new Gallup survey shows that Republicans gained a large number of voters in 2021, although the year started out with more voters identifying as Democrat. By the end of the year, 47% identified as Republican or leaning Republican, compared to 42% who identified as Democrat or leaning Democrat. Gallup attributes the drop in Democratic support to plunging approval ratings for President Biden, while experts say it's due to unity among Republicans.
They're still standing strong behind Trump because of many reasons, and that gives them the power of being unified. And that's the weakness of the Democratic Party, and therefore the weakness or the vulnerability of President Joe Biden.
Recently, Biden's overall approval rating hit an all-time low. The key issues include the economy, foreign policy, and the pandemic.
How Biden can find a way out of that. And quite frankly, I mean, I talked to many experts, I talked to many people on the ground, and there is little light at the end of the tunnel.
Like the Gallup surveys, recent polls on the generic congressional vote show a shift in support, with Republicans now slightly ahead. Military activity on the Korean Peninsula is catching the attention of the U.S. and its allies around the world. North Korea has just fired off another round of missiles with technology built in that has many experts concerned. We spoke to senior research fellow and expert in Korean affairs at the Heritage Foundation, Bruce Klingner. Here's our interview. Bruce Klingner, thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Bruce, North Korea on Monday launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles. This is the 4th missile test since the start of 2022, which is less than a month. Also, the 2nd test after the Biden administration imposed its first set of sanctions on the North Korean regime. So what do you think North Korea is trying to do here?
It's a continuation of the developmental testing of short and medium range ballistic missiles that they've done quite a lot of in the last several years. In 2019, they did 26 missile launches and then 9 more in 2020 and then a number in 2021. So they've revealed several new weapon systems in the last several years and already 1 or maybe 2 new weapon systems this month. So it's really almost a redundant series of missiles for different ranges, but all of them increase the threat to our South Korean and Japanese allies, as well as U.S. forces and citizens based over there.
Now, North Korea claims that some of these missiles that they're testing are hypersonic missiles. What do you think about that capability, and has Pyongyang truly developed this?
They likely have. Now, people are really focused on the hypersonic, but really any ballistic missile that travels more than about 300 miles is going hypersonic or Mach 5 or higher. So it's not so much the speed, but what's of greater concern is the maneuverability of the warhead. So these kind of missiles can fly at a flatter trajectory so that it's harder for radar to detect and track them. And then as they're inbound on the target, they're maneuverable, which they may be able to evade Allied ballistic missile defenses. So any development of North Korean missiles is worrisome, particularly those that have greater capability of evading missile defenses.
Now, since we've seen this flurry of North Korean launches here, we've seen that the U.S. repeatedly will condemn the launches, but at the same time is calling for a dialogue. Last week, the Treasury Department issued its first set of sanctions on North Korea. Do you think that the Biden administration really has a clear and effective strategy when it comes to dealing with this issue? And what's the best approach from your perspective?
Well, often there's a false debate between should we use diplomacy or pressure, and we need both, along with a number of other instruments of national power that have to be used in a comprehensive, integrated strategy. So the Biden administration, like its predecessors, has not fully enforced U.S. law or fully enforced UN resolutions. Predominantly, we haven't gone after Chinese banks and businesses that are helping North Korea evade the sanctions. So that's something that we can do. And we've gone after, say, British and French banks for money laundering for Iran, but we haven't gone after any Chinese banks for doing that. In the meantime, meantime, we need to maintain the hope for dialogue, even though we've had a number of failed agreements. It's not to say we don't try again for a better crafted agreement. But then in the meantime, we also have to maintain the deterrence and defense capability, not only of U.S. forces, but in conjunction with South Korean and Japanese forces to maintain the shield for our homeland as well as our allies, while we try to both pressure and engage with North Korea to get them to finally denuclearize.
Now, Bruce, you mentioned China there a couple of times. How much of a role does Beijing play in this game?
Well, many people think that China controls North Korea because it's so large and North Korea is so small, and that China is responsible for probably 95% of North Korean foreign trade. But North Korea, over the decades, has showed that it can play off different countries, including its allies, so that they don't have as much influence over Pyongyang as many people think they do. But China has been part of the problem rather than part of the solution. They tend to act like North Korea's lawyer in the UN Security Council, and they turn a blind eye to sanctions violations, which is occurring on Chinese soil or in Chinese waters.
Bruce Klingner, thank you.
Thank you very much.
The Golden State Warriors co-owner Chamath Palihapitiya is now in hot water after saying that nobody cares about persecuted Uyghurs in China.
And nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think that's nice that you care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just telling you a very hard...
Wait, you're saying you personally don't care?
I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
The partial owner of the Golden State Warriors said in a podcast when the co-host brought up a recent U.S. ban on products from Xinjiang over forced labor. This clip drew wide attention and broad criticism on social media. Boston Celtics center Enes Kanter Freedom called Palihapitiya's comments a shame. He wrote, "When genocides happen, it is people like this that let it happen." And Senator Ted Cruz said on Twitter, "All that matters to them is more money from the CCP." Late on Monday, Palihapitiya walked back his comments, stating that, I quote, "recognize that I come across as lacking empathy." Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaffirmed America's unshakable commitment to Ukraine while talking with Russia today. According to the State Department, Blinken stressed the importance of de-escalating tensions surrounding Russia's military buildup in and around Ukraine. In a call with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Blinken reiterated the U.S.'s commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. Blinken will meet with the Russian Foreign Minister on Friday in Switzerland. He will first travel to Ukraine to meet with its President Vladimir Zelensky, and then to Berlin to meet his German, British, and French counterparts. They will discuss responses to possible Russian military action. That's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in. From Washington, D.C., I'm Steve Lance, and we'll see you tomorrow.